Everything began to change during Javier Solana's time in Brussels, due at that time to the painful ex-Yugoslavia experience and to the terrorist attacks, 9/11, London and Madrid ones. But now, intelligence and security are definitively an EU topic. And I offer you to dig in on two main strands. The first one being, what do we really mean when we speak about intelligence and security in EU? Second strand, what are the main challenges and opportunities, including in terms of a common intelligence-based strategic culture for further developments? The intelligence and security developments in the EU scene. We have begun with a very modest beginning from 2002 up to 2014, and we could speak for this period of time of a first generation of EU intelligence and security actors. At the very beginning, there was 3 points which were covered. The very beginning was the external coverage outside the EU, with the creation of a civilian and military strategic intelligence analysis fusion centers, the civilian one being CITSEN, known now as INSEN, and the military one being the UMS INT. They are working hand in hand within what is called the single intelligence analytical capacity, which means that nearly all their papers must be made together, CIVMIL. And we have an intergovernmental space imagery agency, which is EU SATSEN, which has the particularity to be currently, thanks to the treaties, the only EU organism clearly allowed by treaty to collect intelligence due to its origin, because SATSEN was a former agency of the Western European Union, and when it was absorbed, went with some specificities. On the internal coverage, it was done in support of the existing national security apparatus, and you had two main Brussels actors. The main Brussels actors being DG Home, the Ministry of Interior, if I want to simplify, inside the EU, with its various security working groups, on one hand, and on the other hand, the counter-terrorist coordinator for a long period of time, Mr. Gilles de Kerkhoff, that you have perhaps heard about, who was very active on many domains. And outside Brussels, you had two main agencies, law enforcement agencies, and you have heard the deputy head of the Europol here. So Europol and Frontex developing quickly inside their own agencies some security capacities and some intelligence analysis competences. The third point of this very modest first generation was small internal security branches in all the EU institutions, quickly completed by a network of regional security officers in charge to protect physically the CSDP missions and the delegations. So you could see here, I put a simplified scheme in order to make the strategical level, the more security level, and what I will call the agencies with their different role. And I try to put it in their different type of actions. We went towards a more robust setup. I will call it the second generation of the intelligence and security within the EU, which has been done roughly between 2015 and up to now. Why we went to something more robust? The first set of reasons were pressure by the Commission on two strands. First, there was a willingness to establish a sort of counter-terrorist special branch inside Europol, which would have been called ECTC. It exists, but has not gone up to the point to be a special branch. And to enhance inside Frontex what is called the Risk Analyst Unit, which is an intelligence fusion center. And they had some concept of what we called criminal intelligence cell within the EU missions, where some people from Europol and Frontex could be posted in order to collect information to support security. It was tested in a very reduced format. I will not elaborate on that, but there was some attempt in this domain. This was the first set of reasons for a more robust intelligence and security aspect. But the really biggest game changer was very simply the little green man wake-up call. The first consequence was EU-NATO rapprochement, and some actions led and directly led to defense-related needs. The first aspect was developments on hybrid threats, which has forced to begin to have a more hybrid approach, joining national and EU forces first in 2015-16. And then, after July 2016, the Warsaw EU-NATO Joint Declaration to begin to discuss hybrid threats between EU and NATO, including in the intelligence domain. And there was also, due to this EU-NATO rapprochement and to the needs linked to defense, the creation of a true military staff within the EUMS, which was called the Military Planning and Conduct Capacity, with its first dedicated but quite small tactical intelligence cell, which is called the MPCC G2. The second set of consequences created by the little green man wake-up call was the idea for Europe to be a true security and defense player, which means a reinforced level of security within the institution. In 2017, we had the establishment of the EU Security Union Task Force of Sir Gillian King, a task force under the order of a dedicated commissioner, which per se was a very strong message within the EU institutions. This task force was a real game changer within the Commission, and by consequence between the Commission and all the members of the intelligence community, first hand for enne, for SAIAC, and for the security branches. Last point, the creation of DG Défi, in charge of defense, research and security and space, transforming EU as a serious defense actor, has also created enhanced security needs, because DG Défi, since its inception, has become, as guessed, a dedicated intelligence target which needed to be protected. What are currently the three main trends that we must have in mind when we are speaking about the European intelligence and security setup? First point, volens nolens, EU has become a true autonomous intelligence and security actor. Volens, there is a rising demand from the EU decision makers. There is more appetite, more buy-in, and more security awareness. And as I'm saying very often, you need two to tango. If you are not doing effort, if you are not asking for intelligence, you will never receive intelligence. So there was a change in this period of time, which is clearly visible. Volens, but also nolens. A lot of pressure to increase the security and the intelligence setup were also done, and we have to be clear, because of NATO and US. More cooperation with NATO means that we have to protect some elements of NATO secret documents going in EU. First example, military mobility, top secret in NATO, and treated, I will say, artistically for a certain period of time inside the EU. And you have to respect some rules. Second, nolens, because in March 2016, we have seen the very first dedicated terrorist attack specifically targeting EU. It was in Mali. We have a chance that we have targeted EUTM, which was able to answer and to be protected. But since this time, we have repeatedly attacks against EU missions. So we are forced now to reinforce the security of the EU missions. And we have also attacks made by the Russian proxies with destabilization actions in order to destabilize the EU actions in some areas. The second big trend to have in mind is a very simple one, very positive response from member states. The number of member states' intelligence officers officially given to the EU institution headquartered in Brussels is since 2019 and 20 superior at 200, more than 200. But you have also some intelligence and security officers in other EU institutions, especially for force protection inside the mission analyst cells and other aspects linked to the protection and force protection. The third point, the third trend, is the need for more intelligence as led to the EU threat analysis drafted in October 2020 in order to launch the strategic compass that everybody has heard about. For the very first time in the EU history, an EU strategy was based on an assessment of the threat made by the intelligence community. Something which seems for us very natural, is done in every nation since a long period of time. It's done in NATO nearly every year with a joint threat assessment and other elements, has never been made before October 2020. And since then, because it was functioning well, has a good impact, it is now repeated every 2 years. In conclusion of this first part, I would like to say that up to 2020, strategic cultures were essentially national, intimately linked to their own diplomacy, own intelligence, and own sovereign defense apparatus. Now we have some strategic culture, really strategic at the EU level. A distinct European intelligence and security community have emerged, which is of an hybrid nature, fusing national elements, because a large part of what I've said is still intergovernmental, and some EU considerations. So I have made this picture of where we stand, first part. I would like now to enter what are the main challenges and opportunities ahead of us. The opportunities for the new intelligence and security developments that we'll have to see in front of us. First, I will be very blunt, the deteriorated intelligence and security panorama is forcing us to live up to the challenges and to make a far better use of the existing intelligence and security capacity. The aggressive Russian and Chinese actions are endangering the former balance of power and the international state of law. We have a need to gain for self-insurance some autonomy in defense and armament. And we are no more sure on the middle long term of the full support of our long-standing transatlantic ally. And we have also the need, the absolute need, to have a minimum of capacity at the EU level to complement and support NATO, at the minimum. On space and cyber, which are very global, borderless, and fluid spaces, there is a need to have on top of the national capacities some joint pool of means, which means also some intelligence and common assessment. Last point, the assault against the Western organized globalization force us to have a better understanding of non-Westernized decision makers. And in order to do so, and to understand better their respective environment, that means better exploitation of the expertise existing within our trained intelligence analytical workforce. But I want also to do some little more deep dive. What are the currently badly or even uncovered intelligence and security EU needs? First of all, we have not a critical mass in EU, both in terms of security and communication. Why not regrouping the existing means and assets into EU-dedicated agencies? Here I'm copying a little what has been done in NATO, where you have a secure communication agency and something NOS, which is near from a security agency. We have scattered elements in different institutions, as you could have seen in the previous slide. We need a far more robust tactical MPCC G2 to protect our missions, as our EU missions and actions are now deployed, as we could see now in the Red Sea, in more contested areas and in more complex environments. So we need to deliver better tactical intelligence and not only strategic intelligence to our EU missions. Last but not least, on the deep dive, I would like to say that in order to stay relevant and to influence the Commission, which is more and more the dominating defense and security actor within the EU institutions, some adaptations will have to be done and some reinforcement to the existing EU-INCENT SIAC will have to be done. I will list 3 possibilities or 3 topics to follow now. Artificial intelligence and all its consequences in terms of security for our economic basis, protection of our industrial basis, especially in defense, and our critical infrastructure. We need to deliver better intelligence in this domain to the EU institutions. Space security. And here I'm not speaking about SSA, but I am speaking about cyber, EI, kinetic vulnerabilities, attacks of the links between the satellite and the stations on the ground. Last point, financial economical intelligence, especially on sanctions. The sanctions are done now at the EU level, and they have to be refined, clearly. Second, on protection of our investments in defense, space, and research. We have to be sure that when we are giving money, we are not giving it to countries which are not with our value and not participating to the creation of a European industrial basis. It is a need clearly identified by the Council and the Commission since 2019, but which has been really only partially tackled. So I've seen here some opportunities, so points that could be developed, and I will go quickly on some challenges towards new developments. First point that you have to have in mind is by design, due to its needed wide coverage, EU is a complex intelligence and security scene, far more than in NATO, because we are covering far more subjects, and we have to cover all the aspects of governmental and intergovernmental issues, and not like in NATO, or where everything in fine is subordinated to defense and military needs. Second aspect, we have legal differences between the various national security and intelligence committees, which has some consequences when we try to work at the EU level. Last point, the blurring of EU and national competences is creating some sensitivities with the sovereign national intelligence communities, which are still the main provider of intelligence at the EU level. There is nevertheless a trend to increase the common affairs, and many topics where EU, despite limited competences or no direct competences, is asked to support and complement the national actions. This impacts also the intelligence. I will be very quick on the other internal EU challenges. The first one is a dissemination problem. EU is a baroque compilation of various communication systems which are not fully interconnected and which are different very frequently from one institution to another. We have nothing comparable to NATO, where we have a strong and enforced security set of rules and one main secure communication means, which is named BICES. Some significant progresses have been done. I will not complement it here. If you have some questions, I will go on this subject. One of the main being the nomination of a dedicated DG security head in the Commission, Mr. Ilkar Salmi, just a few weeks ago. But the effective, timely, and secure identic dissemination of sensitive information or intelligence to the various EU decision makers who have to coordinate their action is still, in practice, not achieved in many cases. Because they must have the same picture on the same time, and not with a delay of a few hours. And why? Because we have a globally very weak security and intelligence culture inside the core EU institutions. A huge percentage of people, despite their need to know, have no valid clearance. They have also no knowledge how to use EU intelligence, which is no more the case in our member states, where progresses have been made in the 2000s. I insist it is not a problem only for intelligence, it is also a problem for everything sensitive in the domain of defense, security, and research industry. How to tackle this cultural dimension? I will be very quick here also. ICE, the Intelligence College in Europe, could be a major tool. Why? Because when more cooperation is needed, more common culture is beginning to be mandatory. The Intelligence College in Europe was created in 2019, based on initiative of French President in Discours de la Sorbonne in September 2017. It was partially inspired by the military Erasmus program and the integrative impact of the creation of the French National Intelligence Academy on the French intelligence community, with an idea to create a process helping the security intelligence community to think European, to begin to work as European, without weakening or touching the internal national sovereign setup. We are in our 5th anniversary. We are training now, currently, every year, 1,000 intelligence officers. We are touching 300 EU officials of a certain rank through different types of actions. What are the two ongoing developments interesting for the EU intelligence and security culture? We are currently transforming our academic setup of 35 universities, think tanks, into a productive and operational network. The idea is to add to our first main pillar, the creation of a common culture as a foundation for more intelligence, a second pillar turned around research, creativity, and innovation. And since 2022, we have established a dedicated EU line of effort with a better outreach to the EU institutions. To conclude, I would like to give you some of my convictions. We have seen up to now developments on top of what was created by Solana, which was really the first great leap forward. I am convinced now that we need shortly to begin to think again ahead of what we have currently, if only to follow the development of the role of the Commission. And as European defense has evolved from CSDP, classical CSDP, to something more robust in terms of PESCO, arms production, and so on, it is time to begin to think in terms of an intelligence and security enhanced cooperation between member states, shaping a coalition of willing on security and intelligence matters, open to all member states according to their capacities and interests, and working more clearly in support of a rising defense and security capacity of the Commission. Ultimately, it was like this that Citizen in Sen was created in 2002 by 7 willing nations. More than 20 years ago, later, there is still here for me a source of inspiration. So thank you for your attention.